Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of When Movies Were Good, recorded here in Melbourne, Australia, still in lockdown conditions. I'm Rachel, and I'm joined by the Jonathan Harris of this podcast, who's recording at his home, hence the telephone recorded conversation between us today. Matt. Matt, how are you doing?
Oh, yeah, I'm good. I mean, with similes like that, I'm going to get a big head very soon, and it's hard to find a hat that fits me as it is.
Oh, definitely. No, anybody that, you do have sort of the enunciation and all that of Jonathan Harris. He spoke with that very sort of Shakespearean sort of slant to his speech and discussion techniques, etc. So that I think that's a good thing to have. So
you got flooded once in the comments page. Someone said they'd listen to you read the phone book.
Oh, great. Actually, and as I was joking around with you earlier today, before we started recording, that I am actually going to lend my voice to an interesting project, which I can't really talk too much about, but I'll be interested to see how that goes. And I actually do. I think I think so will several of my friends too, given the nature of the material. But that wasn't why anyone called. So, welcome to When Movies Were Good. We are doing a Marlene Dietrich double. We sort of got enmeshed into the Boris Karloff Frankenstein world over the last month or so. So now we're catching up again with one of the beautiful women, one of the most famous classic film stars of all time, the beautiful, the irrepressible Marlene Dietrich. So, Matt, you suggested Marlene Dietrich. Is there anything that you just want to say about her off the top of your head just to start with, or...?
I suppose I'll just say right off, these two roles we've looked at of hers aren't the top hat and tuxedo ones. That might have to wait till another episode. We often seem to pick films where we're actually looking against the stereotypical image of the actor in question.
Yeah, that's right. It's also what sort of films we can get our hands on as well, because sometimes we've got all these...
That helps too.
We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then we realise it's not on iTunes or it's not on Prime or it's not on YouTube or wherever. So you have to be able to watch the movies as well. But most of these famous classic movies are available. So we are doing a Marlene Dietrich double. We are doing the two films that we're doing for Marlene's career. Ones that are well-known films and a little bit against type, I guess, for her. So we're doing Destry Rides Again, which is a 1939 American Western film, directed by George Marshall and starring, in one of her most fun roles, Marlene Dietrich and James Stewart. So a really sort of jam-packed sort of film. Then the other one that we're doing is a very famous film, of course, of the great Orson Welles, A Touch of Evil. It's a 1958 American film noir, directed and written by the great Orson Welles, and he also stars in the film as well. So the screenplay for A Touch of Evil, in fact, both of these films, Destry Rides Again and A Touch of Evil, were based on novels, somewhat close in some ways, and then very, very artistic license in other ways. I haven't read either of the novels, but it was the Whit Masterson novel Badge of Evil that A Touch of Evil was based off. And so we had actually Charlton Heston in an unusual change of pace. He very well known for playing Ben-Hur and Moses and a lot of these great larger-than-life film roles. We have the wonderful Janet Leigh in the film as well. And then Marlene Dietrich kind of plays a sort of Anne guest starring, sort of supporting, like when she comes on the screen, sort of steals the whole thing sort of role in this film. And she looks exquisite in this film. I love the darker hair on her. So just
by the time of this movie, she was really one of the iconic names and only had to appear on 10 Minutes to justify top billing.
Yeah, she was stunning in this film, and she wasn't a young woman at that stage either. She would have been into her, because let's have a look at, let me just go back in. So she was born in 1901. So A Touch of Evil was 1958. So she was 57 when she made that film. And let's face it, in the era of classic film actresses, if you didn't transition over into more of a character actress, or you traded a bit more on that, then you didn't sort of have the longevity. But having said that, because these actresses were so well known from their the classic movie era, they were still always in demand for TV. I mean, watch any sort of, episodic TV shows of the 60s, 70s and 80s, and you'll still see a lot of these classically well-known actors and actresses doing episodic TV, which is
yes,
awesome.
Columbo's a godsend for that.
Yeah, definitely. And you had things like The Love Boat and some of the super soaps of the 80s. You had people like Ava Gardner and Celeste Holm and of course, Jane Wyman and, really famous, well-known people actually continuing to work. And that was the era of actors where they just continued to work. So we quickly just go through a little bit about, not that we could ever do it justice in the time frame that we've got, a little bit about Marlene Dietrich. So she was born Maria Magdalena Dietrich. So Marlene was sort of a composite of her first and middle name. She was, as everyone will understand just from her name, her accent, she was born in Germany in 1901. She was an actress and a singer. She has a very unique, deep singing voice, and her career spanned from the 1910s. So she was performing since she was a young girl to the 1980s, actually. She was very prolific, and she really, she had her film career. There was TV, but she was also a very well-known, well-traveled, and much performed stage and cabaret actress, and that was her bread and butter. So she was born in the Berlin area in 1901. She did perform on the stage, and she started off her film career in European silent films. They were very prolific with what they were doing in Europe at the time. She made a film in 1930 called The Blue Angel, and that brought her international acclaim. And then, she, of course, Matt, what do we know? They got that contract at Paramount, moved over to Los Angeles. And
the rest is history.
The rest is history. You got to get that contract. Once you get that contract, I'm not saying it was all easy going or easy street after that, because there were a lot of things locked into their contracts. But once you got that, you had the stability. You were able to move, especially if you were an actor from the UK or Europe. You were able to move, to live there, and had that steady ongoing work, which is not something really afforded to actors now, unless you're sort of running your own production company, I suppose. Now, she did star in a whole slew of Hollywood films. Now, this gentleman, Joseph von Stenberg, who directed Blue Angel, she started her Hollywood career working with him exclusively. So Morocco. Now, Morocco, Matt, is that the one where she's wearing the top hat and tails? Is that was where she got the Academy Award nomination? I think that's the very famous sort of figure that she's playing in the film, where she wears the suit and the top hat and all that sort of stuff.
I'm not sure if she wore it more than once, because I'm trying to remember if she had the suit and top hat on in Die Blaue Engel or Die Blaue Engel as well, because when I was studying German, we watched a snippet of it to sort of study Weimar Republic culture.
Okay.
I can't remember if she was wearing a cabaret outfit or a suit and top hat.
It's very Liza Minnelli, Joel Grey, cabaret, that sort of thing. But that was one of the iconic things that she was known for, that visage of wearing the top hat and the suit. And that's a very cabaret style thing that a lot of female performers were doing back then too. So she made that film Morocco. She made Shanghai Express, Blonde Venus. And then the films that we're talking about were sort of just as she had established herself as a Hollywood sort of powerhouse, basically, and Destry Rides Again came in. So if you think about her in Destry Rides Again, she was already 38 by the time she got a bit of a late start, obviously coming in from overseas.
Well, by the time of the sound era and when she was in America, she would have already been fairly mature.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, she was in Alfred Hitchcock's Stage Fright in 1950s. She was in Billy Wilder's Witness for the Prosecution. And she was also in Stanley Kramer's Judgment at Nuremberg, which I would like to see. I haven't seen that film yet. And then, of course, also the other film that we're going to briefly discuss here today, Orson Welles' Touch of Evil. So she also she spent most of the 50s to the 1970s touring the world as a cabaret performer. So good on her. I think that's fantastic. I really love when you have performers who are a jack of all trades. They love their films, they love their TV, but they're happy to jump on the stage. And that, to me, that's an all-round performer. I don't understand actors who don't want to do stage work. That's for me, that's the bread and butter. I don't know why.
Well, yeah, if you do stage work, you get to sleep in.
Yeah, that's right. But you also have that live interaction with the audience, and just knowing that, you know, that you can actually pull it off. You see a lot of people that perhaps did a little bit of stage work early in their careers, and then they try, and then they're predominantly known for TV and they're predominantly known for films. And then they try and go back on the stage, and it's an absolute disaster. And I'm thinking of one particular well-known film actor that I was reading starred in an adaptation of Stephen King's Misery on Broadway, and essentially read his lines off cue cards night after night. And I think to myself, you as an actor, with the amount of money that you've made off your films, granted this person's mostly known for his action films, but I'm like, how could you do that? Like, how embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like, I
mind you,
don't
Marlon
understand.
Brando was notoriously sloppy with learning lines towards the end.
I know, and I think one of the reasons I kind of gave up my career performing is because I just, I don't know if anyone out there's seen the movie Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman, not that that's got anything to do with the era of films we're discussing, but his character in that film stars on a soap opera, and essentially he doesn't like any of the lines that he has and just starts making up his own lines. And I feel like I want to do that, so I think I better give that whole game away. So it's actually worth watching that film to see the look on the co-actor's face on the soap opera when he starts going off on his own tangent. And they're like, this isn't in the script. But the funny thing is, he actually does know the script. He just doesn't like it. But anyway, that wasn't why anyone called. So we'll get back onto Marlene Dietrich. But she was, you know, she performed for the USO, you know, when she became an American citizen. Obviously, she renounced her German citizenship. Although she was buried in Germany, that was her last wish, because she died when she was living in France. She was actually 90 or so, and then she was buried back in Germany. But she, she worked on the front lines during the war, and she received honours from the United States, France, Belgium and Israel just for her participation in the war effort and being such a supportive humanitarian as well. So she really led a very varied and interesting life, and since her death, it sort of came out that she was bisexual. So she was married once. And did have one child, but I think that guy was, I guess the term would be a beard now. So I don't know what his inclination was, but it was kind of a marriage of convenience, and they got what they wanted out of it. And she did have male partners and female partners, and you really can tell that about her. It looks like she does have a foot in both camps, as they say. So we'll jump over just quickly and have a look at these two films that we watched from Marlene. So we've got Destry Rides Again. So we've got the wonderful James Stewart, who doesn't like James Stewart in this film. And it's a real kind of rollicking sort of film. So basically there's this fictional western town of Bottleneck, and the sheriff is killed when he starts delving into this rigged up poker game. And basically Marlene Dietrich's character is involved with all of these people at the saloon. So they appoint the town drunk, this man, as the new sheriff, assuming that the powers that be, the corrupt powers that be in the town, can manipulate him. And anyway, they get in a gentleman called Tom Destry Jr., who is James Stewart's character, to come in and make Bottleneck, which is what the town is called, a lawful and respectable town, although he likes to do it in a more passive and intellectual way. And it's a really fun, kind of interesting movie. There's a real light side to it with all the brawls and things happening in the saloon in the town. But then
I love the opening credits where it was like the names appearing over a widescreen bar fight.
Yeah, anything to do. I think if I had to live in a period of history, like as a woman, I think living in the Wild West would have suited me, because women fought back then, they sang, they rode horses around. I'm not saying it was all fun and games, but you sort of were able to go against a little bit, compared to a woman living in the cities or living in the cities of Europe or wherever. I think the Wild West would have been a good place for me. And yeah, I mean, when they got into the saloon at night, that's when things started kicking off again. I don't know how they had the strength to do that and then get back up. And that was the era of the stagecoach. It was before, rail was around, or rail was in its infancy. And it's just a fascinating period of time. So what did you think about this film, Matt? Did you like it? It's a Western film. It's a lot of fun, but there's a serious side to it as well.
I liked it very much. We talked about how fun the opening credits were, and the sort of the fact that it was sort of tongue in cheek with itself. A lot of the times, you often had a humor brought in with the gun toting scenes and the like. It does show you that by this point of time, the Western genre was so well known in movie audiences that it's kind of like when you got sort of 15 or 10 or so years into the Bond films, where you start to incorporate jokes because you're kind of taking a light on the genre you've created for yourself. And so the fact that Jimmy Stewart starts doing things like the fancy marksmanship work as a way to sort of scare the pants off evildoers, as a way to show, look, I may be not much of a tough guy, but I can just shoot you if I need to.
Yeah, I thought it was look, there's something kind of comforting about Westerns, actually, from any different era, even modern Westerns, because they have those certain types in the films that the audiences really relate to. There's the good guy, the bad guy, sort of the strong damsel in distress who then redeems herself at the end, sort of thing. And, you know, there are those strong sort of stereotypes, and as much as feminism and all the rest of it, I guess, has made inroads into society, there's still that whole thing. I mean, I myself as a woman, and I'm quite a tomboy and stuff, I'm still very attracted to, the James Stewart sort of characters in these films. And I actually came across, so Destry Rides Again was kind of the second version of the book that was made, which takes a lot of artistic license. And then George Marshall, years later, with Audie Murphy in the role of Destry, this film's just called Destry, essentially remade the film with Audie Murphy. And I decided to watch that one as well because I thought, oh, well, this looks interesting too. Very, very similar film. I wouldn't say it's a shot-for-shot remake, but it's very close to the James Stewart, Marlene Dietrich version. Lots of fun, lots of dancing, wonderful colour, and I really liked Audie Murphy in that film playing Destry as well. And I loved seeing his character on the screen. I loved seeing James Stewart's character of Destry on the screen. So as a woman, I'm very attracted to that. So that's that archetypal sort of, the sheriff's come to town. And even though this is a different, Audie Murphy also played the guy as very sort of laconic and not so stressed and taking a different approach to things, but being tough when he needed to. And I really enjoyed his version of Destry as well. But Marlene Dietrich in this film was absolutely stunning. Her, the production design, her costume design, everything, her singing. I mean, it's just, I prefer sort of maybe a higher register in the voice, but she's got this really distinctive lower voice, and she's playing this character, Frenchie, who's got this accent. But she really did a great job in this film. She was very engaging in the role. So if you're looking for a fun Western, this one's it.
And looking at both of these roles, where focusing on Marlene, she plays they don't say it literally, but pretty much she plays a lady of the night in both films, whether it be the manager or the actual worker, as well as doing sort of bar management on the side, because really they're trying to be very G-rated as they can. And comparing the two ages of her life and her character, although it's chronologically impossible because the films are set about 100 years apart, it's almost like you can take the same lady living on the fringes of society and how she deals with the world through different stages of life, thinking of how she is in touch with evil as well in a much more mature form.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a little bit of intrigue going on behind the set with James and Marlene. So this was actually the first Western that James Stewart had made. I didn't realise that. And he wouldn't go back to the genre until the 50s. So he did Winchester 73 and then Broken Arrow, which are two very well-known films. So he sort of went away from that and did, James Stewart's, done a whole range of different types of performances in different films, from courtroom dramas, The Guy Next Door, et cetera, et cetera. Writer
Yeah, this
director
does
Peter.
remind me a lot of his role in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the kind of similar innocent boy going into the wrong side of town.
Yeah, definitely. And, yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. And look, you know, at the end of the day, it's still James Stewart. He still brings his own persona to the role. As much as we like to say people are actors, essentially they're playing different versions of themselves more often than not. Now, Marlene Dietrich told director Peter Bogdanovich that she and James Stewart had an affair during the shooting of this film, and she became pregnant and had an abortion. So, wow, what an interesting story that is. But that's, you know, that happened quite a lot back then, because all this stuff was swept under the table.
And not just because of the reasons that other women in outside of Hollywood did that, but for example, I think Ava Gardner deliberately aborted a couple kids she had with Sinatra because she was saying that there were some rather unpleasant clauses put in their contract for being pregnant during that period. I'm not sure what they were exactly, but I guess it would be effectively like a sort of they'd be treated like you're making yourself unavailable for a contracted period, and we're going to penalize you for that. Probably that sort of attitude.
Yeah, I mean it's just very interesting because I guess James Stewart has that sort of you know, that sort of boy next door appeal, which is one of the reasons I love him. But, you know, same with Ray Milland, all these people, you know, if you peel back the layers a little bit, and even, hey, come on, his name hasn't been mentioned so far. Even Larry Hagman, his daughter wrote a book after he passed away, and he always came across as, oh, look, that's JR, that's not me, I'm the committed family man. And then in this book, I mean...
you're not an evil person if you have a relationship with a consenting adult. Don't get us wrong on that.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess it's sort of the public persona, and I suppose in Larry's case, he was trying to offset what the JR character, who was like, who slept around with the whole population of Dallas, and oh no, I'm not like that, I'm the mild-mannered, you know, family guy. And in a sense, I guess he was compared to JR, but you know, then just some of the revelations that his daughter, oh, no, Dad had a lot of different people around him.
So maybe it was a question of numbers and perspective.
Yeah, that's right. And also, you know, his best friends were like Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda and stuff, and it was the 1970s, so probably, and Dennis Hopper, so less said about that, the better. So look, Destry Rides Again is a really fun movie. Check out Destry as well with Audie Murphy. And then there's even the first version of Destry, which was actually made in the early 30s, which is more closely aligned. But Marlena was fantastic in this film, really enjoyed her. So now this film is probably, Matt's going to have a heck of a lot more information about this film than I will. So let's just jump quickly over to A Touch of Evil, which I had heard a lot about because I'm a fan of Janet Leigh. So I had always wanted to see this film and for whatever reason just had never gotten around to it, but had often seen all of the playbills for it. So A Touch of Evil is, 1958 film noir, directed and written by the great Orson Welles, who was such a jack of all trades. He could handle it all. Now, Charlton
sometimes
Heston
to his detriment.
Yeah. Now, Charlton Heston, in a very kind of unusual change of pace, is playing. Now, he is playing a Mexican in this film, and he has a very sort of swarthy look about him. I don't know if that was achieved through lighting or makeup, but his skin seems very olive in this film. And I don't know about his accent, though, unless he was educated in the US. But I guess they weren't too worried about that. It was Charlton Heston.
Certainly, it's the casting choice you wouldn't get away with these days, however talented he was.
No, that's right. Which is, as Matt and I were sort of discussing off the air before, we're like, yeah, it's kind of a shame in a way. It should be the best person for the job, but that's okay. That's what's going on at the moment. So, Matt, do you want to tell the audience what this movie is about? Because I thought it was about something completely different. So, do you want to give the audience a rundown of what the movie was about?
Essentially, it's about a detective who interprets the law and is willing to plant clues to fulfill his gut, as it were. And he is one of these age-old stories, a lawman that's got a stellar reputation, but when he shows himself to be falling low of the mark when he believes his instincts are more important than evidence, that's when the trouble starts.
Yeah, so it's set on the US-Mexican border, hence the reason Charlton Heston is playing a Mexican character. So there's like a time bomb that's in a vehicle at the start of the film. The start of the film is fantastic.
That is my favorite movie scene of all time.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's absolutely the start of this film. Like you see there, oh my gosh, you know, the movement of the camera and then walking in and out of the space, and you know, it's sort of right before this bomb goes off in this car, and the music as well. It's got a lot of drums and percussion, and so.
Well, the fact that you coordinate that huge 5-minute scene, and it's not just stationary; it's in one cut, and it does a huge crane shot over quite a large area of land. You have the cars and coordinating actors moving in and out, all to have that explosion occur at the end, because it's that perfect suspense trap that Hitchcock described, where you sort of put a bomb under the car or whatever, and so the audience knows about it, but no one else does, and just let them be hooked in. And the fact that that was partly motivated to go against the grind of film editors paid off by the studios, because he had the constant problem, Orson Welles, of dealing with studio producers who wished to trim down or alter his storyline, and he'd create long single take shots like that, which were harder to edit.
Yeah, so the version that you loaned me to watch had a blurb at the start of it saying this was re-edited closer to the version that he wanted released. And I guess like most things, the studio had come in and edited the film differently to how he wanted it. So, but that opening tracking shot, that long shot, I mean, it's sort of very. Would you say it's a Hitchcockian thing as well, or more unique to Orson Welles?
Well, they had a lot of overlap in their interest and style at times. Definitely the plot device of, like I said before, of creating suspense by putting the bomb in the car was one that Hitchcock advocated very strongly. But then, and I think the fact that, and Hitchcock himself also tried to do long single take shots as well, although he didn't end up going with it forever. For example, we saw what he did in the film Rope.
Yes, yeah, that's
but
what I
think it is very much a Wells story, though.
Yeah, no, it was absolutely, yeah. So essentially this car bomb goes off at the end of this opening sequence, and Charlton Heston's character, Vargas, who is a Mexican special prosecutor, is vacationing with his wife in the area at the time, and he gets involved in the scenario. And then now, is Orson Welles wearing a prosthetic in this film, or is his nose different or something, or is it just a weight gain?
I can't remember if he had any extra padding or if he just simply gained weight.
Which was easy for him to do. So.
I mean, the limp he would have just put on. Yeah.
So he's playing Quinlan here, and Quinlan is like a 30-year police captain who, you know, is in the area, this sort of US-Mexican border area, and he's kind of the main authority in town. So essentially he's been playing the dirty cop of the area for years, and it comes back to bite him because Charlton Heston's character wants to actually find out what's going on here. So Janet Leigh plays Charlton Heston's wife, and she was amazing in this film. I mean, you always think of her in some of her other roles, either with Tony Curtis or Marion in Psycho, but she had a great presence in this film. And
yeah, she could do a lot of things when you didn't kill her in half an hour.
Yeah. But I wasn't expecting that performance for her. She was actually quite, you know, in your face, and, you know, when she's speaking to the men at the start of the film, and she's very sort of dominant in her own way. And then she has to play these, you know, some comical scenes at the hotel as well. She interacts with Marlene Dietrich's character a little bit. And then she's also got this quite terrorized scene as well. So it was it's definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah, well, like every film noir, it has a ridiculously complex plot, but it gets held together by the strength of those performances.
Yeah, definitely. So when Charlton Heston signed on to do this film, he just finished promoting the long marathon work of the Ten Commandments, which was quite a film to be involved with.
He always seemed to play a character that had a tan.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even though he was, Caucasian, he was sort of a very tan sort of Caucasian, but probably not as tanned as his character was in this film. But, other than, I always get a bit picky with accents and stuff. It's sort of like when Sean Connery was playing a Russian in Russian House and he was speaking with a Scottish accent. Things like that annoy me, but other people doesn't seem to worry them. So, so essentially, I think it was Charlton Heston that actually got Orson Welles involved in the project, because Orson Welles was just signed up to act initially, and then of course Orson Welles, he came in and directed, wrote it, went for the whole thing. So and he
when he was into a project, he got into a project.
Yeah, definitely. So they had an original script, and then Orson Welles came in and essentially rewrote the script. So I'm just having a look at. So he wanted to deal with the thematic elements of racism, and to have the narrative shift around to different points of view. So, yeah, I mean, he rewrote the script in 10 days, so a very talented guy who's able to do that.
I just thought of a great romantic sitcom idea, how to rewrite a script in 10 days.
Actually, I think that'd be right up your alley, because Matt is a writer, so, that would be right up his alley. So it was shot in Venice in California. I suppose Venice back then looked a lot different than it does now. And,
we're talking Venice Beach, not Venice, Italy.
Yeah, that's right, Venice Beach. I don't think the 80s Venice Beach that I'm familiar with would have gone too well, but back then Venice Beach probably would have been a lot different and suited it. But it was amazing. The whole look of the town, everything that Orson Welles was able to create on screen for this film was fantastic. So what do we know, just before we sort of finish up here, what did you think of Marlene Dietrich in this film? Sorry, it's easy to get stuck on Orson Welles, but what did you think of her in this film?
Well, it's kind of when I think of, at one point you think, I felt like, could we justify this as a Marlene Dietrich film because her appearance was only 10 minutes or so? But then I thought of what's been described to me as what makes a good short story, and that's effectively that it's like the last chapter of a book that you don't want to write. And I think that really makes her part in it really stand out, because you really feel that sort of tired chemistry between her and Wells, where they've had that long history working in a similar community. She's obviously managing some sort of brothel institution, but also that she's dealing with this lawman in the long term, and they've had some sort of relationship, and she doesn't feel the need to be running around all over the place. The camera's quite steady when she's there, and she sort of glows through it.
Yeah, so essentially even though this film is considered a classic now, I guess there are different versions of the film floating around. I'm not sure what the initial problem from the studio at the time was. I think they felt that perhaps these long tracking shots, there wasn't enough quickness in the pace of the story. So they essentially wanted to go back in and re-edit the story. Orson Welles was obviously clearly against that. And actually, Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh did back him up, and they refused to go in because they wanted both of them to come into certain reshoots, and they wouldn't do it. So I think the initial release of the film was a little bit of a hodgepodge of different people being involved in the process, but still what the film has shines through. But the version I saw was the version they recut to be closer to his version of what he wanted. So I'm really not sure what the other version was like.
It would be interesting to see what came out in cinemas at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, we had the original release in the late 50s, and then there was a 1976 release. So I think this is when they started trying to put the film back together closer to how Orson Welles had envisaged it. And then we had a 1998 release, so maybe that's the one that I saw, that we saw, and they actually got some Universal editors to go in and re-edit the film again, trying to make it closer to Wells's vision. So there's obviously people out there that know a lot more about Orson Welles than I do, so they probably would have a lot more information about that. But I guess they're trying to get it back to how he wanted it released in the first place. And that you find that more and more happening. If they can discover the missing footage, people will try to get back together and re-edit it for a special DVD. I mean, there's like a 3-hour version of Superman out there. So,
the hardest part is perhaps when directors themselves become involved in the recut because they can't let the project go.
Yeah, so regarding the 98 release, Janet Leigh was interviewed at the Cannes Film Festival, and she said that she saw it later and she thought that it was wonderful. She thought they did an amazing job and it was very well done. It was what he wanted, and it made a lot more sense than the chopped up nightmare there was before. It was fine and it was his. If they told me that from the very beginning, none of all of this would have happened. So there was some controversy because perhaps the Wells family hadn't actually sanctioned that version either. So actually that was that Janet Leigh, or that was maybe Beatrice Wells, his daughter, that was saying that. So essentially there's different versions of the film out there. So I suppose only if you read the original script and worked on the original film with Orson Welles, you would know what was going on. And I suppose that's Charlton, Heston and Janet Leigh. So so
what's an even more confusing hodgepodge of the film was when they released the project that Welles had been working on for many years before he died, and it existed only as a bunch of different rolls of raw and semi-edited footage in his possession, and they only just released it like a couple of years ago now on Netflix, and it's kind of like trying to assemble dinosaur bones from a dig.
Yeah, what's the name of that film? Do you know?
It was oh God.
It's okay. I can look it up. So is it Orson Welles' unfinished film, is it? Hang on, let me just quickly...
Yes. I'm afraid to touch my phone because I'm worried I'll accidentally press the off button like happened before.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think I can get it up here. Just bear with me for a second. It's All True. Is that the one?
That might be the making of documentary.
Oh, okay. Orson Welles missing tape, nonetheless. Because he actually had a lot of unfinished. It wasn't Don Quixote, was it? Was it it that one? Or?
Well, one of you can sort of look at Welles and Hitchcock as kind of polar opposites. Hitchcock was a fairly straight, sober professional. He approached his work with the studio like a musical manager does, where you sort of go through the acts one after the other. If one isn't working or whatever logistic problems has to be cancelled, it has to be. But Welles, when he got it set on a project, he goes so far as, and this wasn't just when he was a big name, even earlier when he was working as part of the Federal Works project, he'd often be getting himself financially involved personally to see it through to his vision, and quite often he'd be stopping for sometimes years at a time on a project because he had to gather money to finish it in stages, and that led to a bit of a confusion with producers and production companies who thought that he took ridiculous times to finish projects, and it wasn't like that at all when you actually put the actual days of work together. But the fact that he had to keep doing fundraising in between takes quite often, partly because he didn't get. I mean, it's very complicated to work out, but from sort of World War II onwards, he just had ongoing problems getting into good, steady relationships with studios. I think part of it was that during World War II, he had a bit of a falling out with one production company, and sort of because he didn't have the right PR people on his side when he was medically exempted because of what was it, a back problem or something. They didn't spin him very well, and so but things just got harder and harder for him, and so he had to be like this sort of lone movie pirate, trying to raise for his own projects, which is more common now. But as we know, that's not the easiest thing to keep hold of.
No, that's well, that makes perfect sense. So, but A Touch of Evil is an interesting film. It is film noir, so keep that in mind if you're going to watch it, because the plots can be quite intricate, and if you literally turn your head for a second to finish making your tea or something and you come back, something else has already changed in the plot. So you really have to pay very much attention. And sometimes I even read the plot beforehand, so I'm like, okay, I am keeping a track of what's actually happening here. It's not that you can't follow it, but in this modern day where it's so easy to be distracted by everything, as opposed to the good old-fashioned days of sitting in the cinema and only having that as your attention. So that was our Marlene Dietrich double. Beautiful woman, sensational, jack of all trades, but definitely catered to a particular taste. I mean, she was a lot different to some of the other, she wasn't like Marilyn Monroe. She wasn't like anybody else. She was her own, not even Greta Garbo, who she was compared to because they were both European, but she was her own.
She seemed to make it her own to be playing people on the fringes of society. Even her famous suit and top hat costume. Remember, that was in a time when many places a woman could get arrested for wearing pants.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, she definitely did push the envelope, and she led life on her terms. So you can't really fault her for that. So Matt, did you want to just let everyone know our social media before we let them know about the next two movies?
Yes, as always, you can see us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at When Movies Were Good, or at Where Movies in the case of Twitter. I can't remember why we couldn't have a more recognizable Instagram handle, recognizable Twitter handle because of that, but I don't know, some weird thing on Twitter, but you didn't need to know that anyway. Our episodes themselves
and a lot of handles are taken anyway on Twitter, so maybe the handle was already taken or it was wrong, yeah.
Yeah, possibly. It gets very confusing. But look, the point is that it's at Where Movies on Twitter. Everywhere else, it's pretty much at When Movies Were Good. As far as hearing our episodes, we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well. So if the platform that you hear your podcast on allows for reviews and positive ratings, we greatly appreciate that. It helps us get in front of more people.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Matt, for joining me today. We're doing a Clark Gable. We're doing a Clark Gable double. We have mentioned Clark quite a bit in the past because he's been in a few other films that we've looked at, especially Gone with the Wind. So we're doing It Happened One Night with Claudette Colbert. That's Frank Capra, 1934, and we're doing a war movie, Run Silent, Run Deep, and that's kind of getting towards the latter stages of his career in 1958. So there's two different time periods, both after Gone with the Wind. So, hang on, Gone with the Wind was 1939.
Well, Gone with the Wind was 1939, and so the first movie I think was like about 5 years before Gone with the Wind.
Sorry, yes, but sorry about that. Sorry, folks. Yeah, because Matt was saying that this film was, in terms of Frank Capra anyway, he thought this was more authentically Clark Gable than what he became known for playing Rent in Gone with the Wind. So apologies on that one.
And this is what often happens in this podcast, because often by the time we get to focusing on a particular actor, very often, or director, very often their most famous film might have already been covered because it crosses over with a different theme. And this happened with Clark Gable. We had already done Gone with the Wind to commemorate Olivia de Havilland when she passed away. And but that's fine because we get to analyze Clark Gable in some other lesser-known roles.
Oh, fantastic. And he's just one of the stalwarts of the classic movie era as well. And, of course, it's always just our opinion, just what we like, what we don't like. The reason we do these period of movies is because all these movies in their own way are good. So until next time, I'm Rachel, and
we're watching good movies.
And we're watching good movies. Sorry about the time delay, folks, and sorry about the phone recording. Anyway, we hope to record together again in person soon, whenever, blah, 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 the government. We don't want to go into that. But take care, folks, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, guys, bye.